This is the Fundamental Escape Podcast with your host, Mark Fitzgerald. I'm David Werba, and this is episode 4. This is the Mark and David show today.
Yep.
So, Mark, you there?
I sure am, David.
Excellent. So, we wanted to just kind of, touch base in a sense and reflect on the first 3 episodes and talk about how we got here and where we're going. So, how did we start? I'll just give a brief summary, Mark, and just interrupt me whenever you want, really.
I will do.
Yeah, hey, man. You, you started, which is what is now the underground cult classic, Marky Mark podcast.
Yeah.
And, right, yeah. And I kind of stepped in to help you improve the sound and the presentation. And when I started listening to the subject matter, what we were talking about, I kind of resonated towards it myself. And I've been doing the intros, and we're just kind of going with the flow. I mean, as we talk more about this, I feel like I'm becoming more involved. I have more to say, but when we talk, I think we both agree that it's kind of okay. It's a discovery.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I thought you were leaving a gap for me to talk there.
Well, hey, I'm looking for acknowledgement at all times, pretty much. No. But I wanted to talk about our background, like how we got here. Why don't you talk about your religious upbringing first?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. I'd have to say. So, I guess when you grow up in a Christian family, there's always that stigma of like not really having a very interesting story. So I'm not sure who, if anyone listening would be familiar, but in Christian circles, we like to do something what we like to call sharing your testimony. So at like a church service or an event, people would get up and basically tell the story of how they quote unquote found Jesus, And my story always felt a little bit boring and ordinary because I'd grown up in a family with my mum and my brothers and, went to a Christian school, went to church every Sunday, things like that. It was a pretty confined space, and I never really asked too many questions. I was handed these religious ideas about faith and about spirituality. We'd read the Bible at home and things like that and pray, and so it was pretty standard evangelical upbringing, really, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, what was always kind of intrigued me was how you got from there to becoming a street preacher. Because you've mentioned that in a few episodes. I mean, it's an interesting story.
That's a bit of an interesting transition. So I can't exactly remember the dates. It was around the time when the internet was first starting to get video content on it, sort of thing, and I came across some street preaching videos, basically by a guy named Ray Comfort, who we've mentioned on the podcast a couple of times, and I was absolutely compelled. I was just sold on it because it was just this. It was, to me, it was like, kind of bold and, just sort of rocking up to random people and talking about faith and spirituality. I was like, can you do that? What the heck?
And he kind of made it sound cool, like it's the thing to do, or?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like something I wanted to be a part of. I was like, I suppose having that kind of, basic belief system of that, the paradigm of like heaven and hell, it was like, well, we've got to get out and tell people somehow, like, this looks like a good enough way to do it. So I basically just watched some of the videos and sort of learned the sort of methods. It was quite a methodical sort of way of doing it. And just made a plan and set a date and went out and hit the streets and started doing it. And I did it for about five years. So it was a bit of a good stint of doing that.
Very interesting, Mark.
Interesting.
We could probably do a whole podcast on those 5 years. Maybe we will.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe we'll
they're all
like.
sort of blurred into. Well, it's interesting when I
I mean,
look
that's
back.
a long time. That's a long time to
It is,
be
it
kind of
is,
a
it is,
yeah.
and I think it's funny when I look at it. I mean, I guess to sort of briefly summarize it now, I guess when I first started going out, it was all about this idea of like I've got a message and you need to listen to me and I don't really care what you have to say, you know.
And you said that was like age 18 to 23, or was that
It was
what was it?
around, yeah, it would have been around that time, maybe a little bit later. I think a little bit
Okay.
later, yeah. But then it was towards the end of my time doing it when things sort of changed, and I think I started to listen to people more. And I'd be asking people questions like, what do you believe happens when you die, and what do you think about this, and
Right.
you know what I mean, like I was actually listening, like not just nodding
Right.
my head, and so that became a real sort of game changer for me because I started seeing the humanity of people instead of just like, oh, here's another soul to save kind of thing, you know.
Hmm. That's a decent segue opportunity for me. I was raised Catholic. And I went to a Catholic grade school. I even went to a Catholic high school. And I just remember in grade school, all the stories of the Bible were just such an important part of what we were taught every day. My teachers were nuns, and so I got the rap on the knuckles with the yardstick more than once or twice in my day. Um,
Ooh.
and they were, yeah, a lot of them were pretty strict. They were kind of mean.
Yeah.
Some were nice, but most were mean. And when I think back at that time, I mean there was periods I didn't want to go to school, like in the real early years, and just because I didn't, I just that wasn't my vibe. I didn't like resonate to that scene. And I would say I think I was about 10 years old when I started getting this overwhelming feeling that I just really did not want to go to church anymore. Like it was really strong. I was making excuses to just not go. And when I did go, I would take like 9 bathroom breaks. Like any opportunity,
Nice.
I'm like, Ma, Dad, I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. And I would just sit in the bathroom for, like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I obviously I didn't go, or I would just sit there. I would just close the door. It's like, this is better than being in that big room.
Yeah.
And it just, I'm like, what's going on? When you're 10, 12, 13, it's like, I didn't, I didn't know of any alternatives. I thought it's just you either go to church or you don't.
Yeah.
That's all I knew. And especially when it's a lot of information's kind of being pushed in my face in a environment that you really didn't have a choice to break free of, unless, like, how many kids when they're 8 years old tell their, like, have that wherewithal to go to their parents and just say, this religion doesn't really work for me. It makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, could we discuss like a different option, maybe go and do it? I mean, that's just not
Yeah.
reality. So I remember when I was like 13 years old, and I would just start having these nights where I couldn't sleep. I called them just mind fucks. Maybe we'll bleep that out. Maybe we
Oh, it's
won't.
okay. It's okay.
Yeah, we probably won't. And I would just be thinking like what I was taught in school of how about hell and heaven and purgatory, and where was I gonna fit? Did I sin enough to where I'm actually may go to hell? Was I just not a good enough person where I was just going to be
Yeah.
stuck floating in space when I die for like 1,000 years?
It's a
And
heavy deal, eh?
it's real heavy, and I had a lot of, man, I just had a problem with it. Like it really bothered. I just couldn't sleep. I'm 13 year old. I'm just sitting in bed, like I was just holding my head, like, man, this is something is not right here. What am I missing? There's got to be something else. It doesn't make sense. Like I felt it in my body. So I kind of like was able to convince my parents. Like we reached a common ground where I just stopped going to church. I think around 13, and it was just okay. I think I told them I still talk to God, which was true. I did. I would still kind of just speak my frustrations and my hopes and desires in my private time. And then college was just I really just didn't think about it anymore. And college is also when I started to just learn about different religions and different belief systems and meeting thousands of new people over that time frame and just starting to expand my mind. But I don't want this to be the David Werba life story, Mark.
Oh,
so
come on, I'm loving
let's,
this. I'm loving it.
No, well, I mean, I guess I did write a song called Wild Monkey, and it was like the nuns from grade school were kind of an influence for me. Maybe I'll play a little clip here.
A wild monkey runs to the arms of grateful nuns who are happy as the sun to caress a monkey's buns.
Yeah, and that song was actually played on the Jenny Jones show in front of 6 million people, Mark. What do you think
Wow.
about that? Thank you very much. Thank
It's
you.
blowing my mind, David.
All right, but anyway, so we're where we are today, if that makes any sense. And I think we both agree, like, we want to kind of make clear our mission in this podcast, like what we're setting out to do. It wasn't specific from day one, was it? We're just kind of exploring.
No, I guess for me, I mean, I started doing the podcast where it was just sort of me recording myself, like with my own thoughts, and I guess for me it was more for myself than anyone else, and I think sometimes that's what it should be, I guess, in many ways. But yeah,
Why did you choose those, like the first three guests, the first three episodes? I mean, what brought you to choose them?
well, there was not. It wasn't a well. I mean, I guess it wasn't a well planned out, chronological order. But I mean, having someone like Kevin Miller, the creator of the Hellbound documentary, as the first guest, I think was a brilliant start, in my opinion, in my humble opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it just, I think, hell is one of those things that is just within religious structures and communities, it is so taboo and it's so hush hush, and it's one of those things that you can't question and you can't challenge, and it's like it's reality, and you might go there, and if you question whether it exists, you might go there, and do you know what I mean? It's like,
no, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I meant to say this like several times to you that when I listened to that podcast, that conversation, even just seeing the word hellbound, it brought me back to my teen years again, where it was like a sin to even read about hell, like a satanic Bible or satanic verses by Salman Rushdie, or anything like that. Like I had this feeling, I would get this shot in my chest if I even saw like a different religious book. And I felt like even if I even touched it, it was a sin. If I opened a page, it's like...
yeah. I guess, I mean, I have to sort of point out, I mean, I've referenced, obviously people who know me know that I am somewhat of a fan of Rob Bell, who is an author,
Right,
I've mentioned
You've made
him a
that
few
clear.
times. But, back in 2011, he came out with the book Love Wins, and, that was, in the evangelical world, was, they called it a firestorm, basically.
Right.
And it was, he got to the New York Times bestseller list. He made the Time 100 most influential people of the year. It just opened up so many doors. And for me, when I read that book, I was like, it's hard to even describe. As someone who grew up with this fundamental paradigm of you go to heaven or you go to hell, and there's no two ways about it, to read a book like that was like, I can breathe, if that makes sense. I was like, I was able to take a breath.
Absolutely. I mean, I get those feelings just when we talk and just as we continue this podcast. That's what's so cool about it. But I mean, just this, I think a lot of people will resonate with this podcast and our episodes and just our choice of guests and the whole discussion, because this might sound odd, but again, going back to the teen years when I was saying I would get like a physical reaction of fear if I would kind of start to break away or look at other alternatives of thought. And why is that? Let's kind of break it down. Why is that? Why would I actually have a physical reaction? Well, if there's a certain strict piece of information that's kind of it's driven into your brain for your entire childhood. Once you kind of break free of that, you're going to have like a physical reaction.
Yeah.
Because it's fear based. That's just the problem I had with it.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Just Christianity, Catholicism, it's fear based, and it creates just understanding a bit of science. It creates like neural pathways in your brain that you have to reprogram. You have to like rewire it just by meditation and reading and just opening your mind and talking to people, and eventually those go away. And I'm sure, maybe a fundamentalist Christian or a fundamentalist from a different religion would have a different opinion on that. And they would say like that's sin, and that's what happens, and you're a lost soul or whatever it is. But on the other side of it, it's like that's not what this podcast is. It's not about bashing fundamentalist Christians or Muslim or any faith. We want to have those guests on the show. We want to talk about everyone. We want to talk with atheists. We want to talk about every New Age philosophy, which I have a few guests in the pipeline already scheduled. And it's just an open discussion. I mean, it's our discovery, it's mine and your discovery, and it's the viewer's discovery. We accept all humans. It's an open discussion. There's no proselytizing going on. We're not leading to like episode 10 where we say, hey, now it's time to join our church. Here's a link to join.
We are actually starting a new religion. We're just coming up with a name.
Right.
There was, it's interesting. No, I totally agree with what you're saying. I really do. And, it was actually in the documentary Hellbound, one of the people that was interviewed came out with the line that they said, the truth should have nothing to fear, Right. And it's, I think it's interesting to me because there are, when you sort of break it down, there are these impulses that drive us that I think some of them do come from a good place. You know what I mean? Like, I think all of us want security. We all want to know that we're safe and that we're okay. And I think that's part of the sort of drive towards defining religion and spirituality,
Well, I think truth and peace are better words than like, just looking for, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to tell you what the best word is, but like just truth and peace is what resonates with me. And that just like the Gus Rowe discussion, I mean, that's like where he's at. Yeah. And it's like his story. It's so interesting. And I meet people like that all the time. And his story of the ashram, I mean, it's like, wow, that's just really powerful. And it's as we continue to talk to these people, we just keep creating good references towards future discussions. I mean, if someone's listening to this podcast, if this is their first podcast, listen to the first 3 episodes. But when I say the ashram story, listen to episode 3 with Gus Rowe. I mean, it's just a really powerful story coming from a man who was a preacher most of his life, and just to see where he's got to now and kind of relate that to your own life. And I don't know, it's cool, man. Yeah. I mean, I'm just really enjoying this.
Yeah, I mean, just going back, I suppose, a little bit to my own story, he's actually a Franciscan priest.
It's always about you, Mark,
It is totally, it's totally about me. There's a Franciscan priest named Richard Rohr, and he talks about the idea that basically that he talks about this idea of the second half of life, meaning this sort of, I guess, transcendence into a new sort of way of being. And he said it usually comes either through great love or great suffering. And for me, it came through what I would consider suffering. I don't know if I would say great suffering, because I know that there's plenty of people out there that have been through much, much worse things than I have. But I have definitely been through my fair share of suffering, and without going into, great detail. So after the sort of 5 years of being a street evangelist, I ended up essentially having a breakdown, sort of thing. And I heard someone quite rightly say that a breakdown is usually an indicator of your world literally breaking down. Like, it's an indication that your system of belief is not sustainable, essentially. And that for me was totally true, because I was in this bubble and it was safe and easy. And I think, without going on too much of a tangent...
Mark, I mean, we talked about this. It's like, it's also the result of not living your truth. I mean, it's the same thing, right? I mean, if you know, like, what's deep inside of you, what your truth really is, if you fight it for just too many years, a lot of people come to a point where you don't have a choice anymore. You have to just give in to your truth. And I know we were talking about,
but some people do. This is the thing, though. In my opinion, in my experience, and my opinion.
No.
Some people don't give in. Some people don't.
No, some people never do. Exactly. I said that in the intro in the last podcast. But the analogy that we kind of discussed just on private phone calls was like the gay, lesbian, transgender community when they finally come out and just kind of announce to the world, I'm gay, I am whatever. It's not a type of thing that they kind of just flip-flop on. I mean, that's like the result of a lifetime that they just can't live anymore. They can't live a lie anymore.
Yeah.
And once they come out, it's like, this is my truth, this is who I am. And you don't go back. I mean, it's the same thing. And then when I was listening to Gus Rowe, it's like, yeah, he's reached his truth with his religious belief. And it just kind of, that was kind of the analogy to me. And it could be something outside of religion, whatever it is. Maybe it's what you always wanted to be, a painter, or you wanted to fly planes, or whatever it is. It's, if it builds up strong enough inside of you, you reach a point where, I mean, it's different ages. Some people are able to live that way from day one, man, just because of the way they were brought up. They were brought up in an open, free manner, and some people were brought up in such a strict, oppressed manner where they never reached that freedom and truth until their deathbed, man.
Yeah,
and it's
for sure. It's interesting, since you sort of brought up the issue of the LGBT and things like gay marriage, and I literally today actually just watched, completely out of curiosity, just watched a movie. It's a short movie called Audacity that was actually produced by Ray Comfort, who I mentioned earlier, and it's
one of your favorite characters.
In the fashion of every Christian movie ever made. It's completely cheesy. First of all, that kind of goes without saying, so great script writing. But it's just incredible to me, the idea, like, it basically portrays this idea, like the lead character is basically saying, he's been a Christian for like about a year, and he's like, he's all zealous, and he's like, I want to share my faith with other people, and and he's kind of like got this dilemma because he knows he lives in a world where gay marriage is accepted and all this kind of stuff. He's like, but the Bible says it's wrong, and what do I do, and how do I like navigate this, and and there's these kind of interactions that he has with these different gay people, and tries to talk to them about it. And the thing that bothers me about it the most is the way that it comes across, that it's like this world where a person is quote unquote saved, and therefore they don't have to do any more self-reflection. Like, they're just, and I guess I resonate with it because I used to be one of those people, admittedly,
right. Yeah.
And it's like you genuinely are taught this idea that you have salvation, you have like the key to the universe basically, and everybody else doesn't. And you've got nothing to learn from them or nothing to gain from connecting with these people. And it's just, it's just so crazy to me, you know. And one of the things
yeah. Go ahead.
sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I was just kind of thinking of that point, how we were talking about fundamentalism in general, like even non-religious use of that term, and you know what might be the opposite of that phrase? Like, is it, in terms of religious, it's like, is it atheism? And it's like, well, not really, because there's different tangents, but really, I think what we both agree on, what bothers us, is people who have a belief system where they say, this is what I believe, and if you disagree, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like that. It's like whatever stance it is. It's like, this is what I believe. I'm not even gonna entertain the idea of trying to understand what you believe. I've just said, it's just, this is it. I believe in this religion. I believe in this, whatever it is, and it's that mindset that causes so many problems on this planet.
Yeah.
And you know, maybe this podcast will kind of go in that direction. Maybe we'll have some episodes that have nothing to do with religion, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think one of the things, going back to the idea of fundamentalism, to me, is this idea that I brought up with both Kevin and Doug, was that whole idea of what I sort of frame as position versus disposition. And it's fundamentalism is not a position, it's a disposition. You have the disposition of being fundamental. It's like it's your approach. You have a fundamentalist approach to life, basically, you know, and that's why it's something that can carry across all kinds of, you know, whether it's atheism or Christianity or, you know, it doesn't matter. You can find it everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Why don't you let's keep this one short. Our podcasts have been a little long lately. Why don't you tell me what you were saying before we started recording about just some people that you've talked to just since we started doing the podcast, kind of what you've found.
Yeah. Well, sorry, I did want to just quickly carry on what I was saying before about my story, and because, like we say, it is all about me. It's my name on the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Let's not forget that. So after I sort of had this breakdown, and then I genuinely was in a place where I had this dilemma, because I was like, you know, the way I describe it is sort of the sort of bricks that you've built your life with are just crumbled, and you can't just rebuild and carry on. So you've got this whole new framework and way of being that you have to navigate and sort of figure out. And so, so I was at a place where I didn't even know if I could genuinely hold on to my faith, because I just couldn't see the world the same way anymore. And I had a good friend of mine who actually gave me a couple of books to read, and you know, they sort of helped me in regards to coming to the awareness that it's okay to have doubts and it's okay to have questions. And this is like, I don't want to get too like from the heart here, but this is a genuine thing that I would like to put out there, and it is something that I've experienced, is that, you know, I've been through a place where, you know, I started asking questions and having doubts, and the people around me weren't in the same place, which is totally fine. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just what it is. But I experienced the reality of basically just being kicked out of the tribe, essentially. Like, people still were nice to me and everything like that, but it was like there was this underlying feeling of like, you're not one of us anymore, you know. And that for me is one of the things I definitely want to put out in this podcast, is to say to anyone, if you've been kicked to the edges, you know, if you've been kind of marginalized and told that you don't belong, I'm here to say that you do belong. Like, you do, you know. Brian McLaren,
I've been there too, Mark.
Yeah, like Brian McLaren, who's an author I'd love to actually get on the podcast at some stage. One of his books that I read early on opens up by saying, maybe you've been told that there's no room for you within the faith, kind of thing, referring to Christianity, obviously. But he says, I'm here to tell you that there is. And he goes, but maybe I'm naive. And then he says, but hope dies hard. And it's that optimism, that kind of like, come on, and we talked about that book, which I need to read myself, but even the title, Rescuing the Bible from Fundamentalists,
Right.
we totally have to read that book, by the way. It's that idea of like, no one owns the truth. I like just the comedian Russell Brand says about all religions. He says religions are a signpost to the unknowable at the end of the day. It's just like
Well,
basically
it took
kind
you
of,
long enough to mention him, man. He's like one of your most common Facebook shares.
yeah.
No,
So,
we both have a list of books here. It's the 100 most influential people in history.
yeah. Hey, I've
I keep
dropped
forgetting.
a few names on this podcast, so I'm getting my
Yeah.
names. I'm getting my but he says it's a signpost to the unknowable. He said it's kind of saying it's sort of in that direction, And I think to me the purpose of religion is to serve you, not for you to serve it. And I think that's something that needs to change. That's my little soapbox rant. So I'm going to step
It's
down.
okay,
now.
Mark. We accept you. And we're going to cut it off right there. I hope you guys have enjoyed the podcast. Here's a little outro music for you. Enjoy.